You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. Thank you for joining us again this week. And guess what? Hey, last week, anyone here? We had some elections that kind of went down. Little good, little bad, but all in all, the way my takeaway from this is that we got a little more diversity in government here in America, and hopefully we've got some accountability for our little orange Cheeto in the office. Maybe we move the needle just a little bit in the right direction. So I kind of stepped forward in this a little hopeful, but also remembering where we've been from, what brought us here, and kind of where we're going forward. So I want to orient our first segment here, our Christian Crazy of the Week, oriented a little bit around kind of a Back to the Future theme. So here's what I want. Because if you're a listener of the show from any time period, you know that we do the Christian Crazy, the rundown of all of the insanity of Christianity for the week. So First up, we've got my good friend, Jim Baker. Jim Baker. This is Jim speaking before the elections. And Jim was a little worried. I'll tell you, he was a little worried about something, and, I'll go ahead. So here's your Christian Crazy. Here we go. And I'll give you a little bit of Jim Baker. Ba-da-bump.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He know what I want.
We got an election coming up in a few days. And if you all don't get out and vote, you're going to feel so bad. Everybody needs to vote. I don't care who you vote for. I mean, I care, but you got to vote.
For God's side.
Don't go around complaining if your candidates don't win if you didn't vote.
All snark aside, I actually agree with Jim here. If you didn't vote, then shut up for the next 2 years or so. And that's what we said here on the show. It's probably like the first time in history where, like, honestly, like in a non-snarky manner, kind of honestly agreeing with what Jim had to say. But don't worry, that's going to end very, very quickly because Jim's mouth is still moving. But I at least wanted to start things on a quasi-positive note. I don't know. But go ahead, Jim.
Do you think God is using President Trump? Some people think he's not. Do you feel like God is using Trump?
What is this, Jim? Are you questioning things? Are you actually asking an honest question? Do you think God is using Trump? Of course, you're not really asking that question because you don't make money off asking that question. So keep going. I'll try not to interrupt.
Well, sure. And I think sometimes in spite of Donald Trump's inability to articulate as well as we would like him to, right?
Yes.
There are times I have to admit I cringe. I'm like, please stop tweeting. But on the other hand, he is an outsider.
Wait. I continue to hear this thing that's coming out of their mouths. It's doubt, dare I say, maybe even caused by self-reflection? Stop it, Stuart. You're being way too hopeful right now. Okay. I'll let it slide for now.
Yeah. He's not, in the political deep state. He's really not, what do they call them? The people that have been in this business for a long time.
Oops, never mind. I retract. Any mention of deep state completely nullifies any conversation. And yeah, you're done here. But this is the Christian Crazy. So continue on with your crazy. because that's what we're here to laugh at. Mock. Woohoo!
And so because of that, God is using him. He really is like a Cyrus-like figure.
Yes.
Sometimes he's a little bit like a Nebuchadnezzar-like figure.
Yay! Bible jokes.
But the whole point is God's kind of using him in spite of himself. What I really like about Donald Trump, he reminds me of a baby Christian. He reminds me of somebody that just comes out of a really rough life where they just did anything they wanted to do, whether it was drunkenness or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would see that in our church. And I always said, I want my church full of drunks and prostitutes and all that. I do. I wanted them there, right? Because I knew this is the hospital they need to be in. And Trump kind of reminds me of that. And if you watch him day by day, his language, everything else is becoming more, I would call it Christian refined, right?
I'm sorry, what? Christian refined. Oh. So we're just here during his, like, spiritual puberty. And right now, his voice is cracking oh, no, this metaphor makes no sense. But what we can see here is in their little brains, they're like trying to work this out. They're trying to make it make sense. They're trying to dance around the fact that Trump is a horrible human being and you guys have all been duped and it's all going down, 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 down. Oh my gosh, this isn't sounding crazy. Wait, where's the crazy part? Please get to the crazy part now.
God has really dealt with me that if our president is assassinated, it will be judgment on America. God's going to protect him as long as we pray over him.
Yes.
And we keep praying.
So by Jim's logic, if people stop praying for the president... Oh, wait, never mind. I won't say that. But you see what I'm saying? Or do you? Or did I actually say anything? I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to get back to the Christian crazy. Otherwise, the Secret Service will be calling very soon for something I didn't say. Or did I? But didn't I? I don't even know. This is the Christian crazy, so expect crazy in this segment.
I mean, it's a miracle he's surviving. Miracle he's doing what he's doing.
Miracle's not the word I'd use, Jim, but you've taken enough time of the Christian crazy this week. And next up, so I told you, this first one, pre-election. So this one is kind of post-election. And this thing came, and if people don't know this, for the people that kind of troll around, I'm a silent troll. I just read, I try to inform, I don't start fights. But when you kind of get into the depths of like the weird alt-righty areas, especially like the conservative Christian areas of the web, just to kind of see where the pulse is going, even though half the time I assume there is no pulse to that crowd. But what you began to hear was this thing, because in the news, the mainstream media, or the fake news, whatever the hell they like to call it, essentially, they just don't like reality right now. So for those that didn't like reality, they were saying, forget this blue wave that's coming. There's a red tsunami happening. This was the thing that was going on. You had lots of the profiteers and prophetesses and prophet-whatevers they are on the internet that have followings. And they were saying, God is telling us there's going to be a red tsunami coming. Meaning that essentially all of these other fools that were thinking the election was going to turn anything even slightly blue. No. All that's not going to happen. If you continue to pray, there was going to be a red tsunami that was going to crush the blue wave and crush everything. And then in their minds, Jesus was going to be on his way coming back, right? Except apparently something happened and someone had to DM Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, just, you shouldn't be idling the car right now. Not yet. So knowing that was a thing, I'm going to tell you the other thing that was fun to happen after the election is watching people try to make excuses. You have all these, I know what God told me. I know this. Oh, but it's still happening. Oh, it's just not happening yet. Oh, it's sounding like someone from a 1-900 number that you call named Miss Cleo to like tell you your future. It feels like that kind of stuff. Because it is that kind of stuff when they're telling people, yes, God told me there's going to be a red tsunami. So I say all of that to say all of this here, which is kind of fun. And this is from Cat Care. Cat Care is off her rocker nutty, man. She is off, but it is hilarious to hear her speak and to also at the same time recognize there are people that wholeheartedly follow her. So what had happened? She had prophesized. Again, she was part of the Red Tsunami crowd because apparently God's really good with branding. Or I don't know, even where they come up with this fun stuff. So Red Tsunami's happening. Afterwards, people started trolling. Not me. I'm just laughing in my head. I'm trying to, not spew more vitriol than I do once a week. Out into the airwaves here. So no, I was reading this, and so she came on to be able to defend what her prophecy was, that the Red Tsunami was happening, telling us it actually did happen. We just didn't see it. So what I want to do here, before I even let you listen to this, I'm going to go ahead and just give prophetess Cat Care just like a little, give her due. Like she at least deserves one of those kind of condescending claps that happen in movies, one of those. She deserves it. She earned it. And I want to make sure that I give it to her because as you listen to her make an explanation of how the Red Tsunami still happened, even though it didn't happen, it's some fantastic gymnastics that she pulls here. And for a lady her age, that is quite impressive. So go ahead and listen.
Some of those Democrats do not want socialism in this country. Some on purpose. Now, this might be a flip for you. People are always accusing Democrats who flipped a Republican just so they could take advantage of it or hide in that area. But I can tell you, some did flip on purpose from Republican to Democrat to see inside the Democratic Party what was going on. See, God does have scouts also. And so those who were sent as scouts and those who got elected because they are scouts in the Democratic Party will make a huge difference in the House. So open your eyes and open your ears to the possibilities that God has another plan besides yours. He did send himself in the Senate and some in the Democratic Party. So pray for both places. Pray for what God wants to do in our country. Stop picking it apart. Stop picking people apart and leave the prophets alone. It is not your job to judge them. It is not your job to demand that they repent for something.
Someone's getting a little testy there at the end. Do you notice that? A little testy there at the end. Whose job is it to judge? Not yours. Let us keep doing our things, right? Because every time we say the word prophet, we're meaning it different in our heads than the way you folks that read the Bible are reading it. It's, Profit. We're here for profit. Yes, but I love Kat. I love her perspective. No, we didn't lose. God was in control, and he sent his little spies to infiltrate because God does stuff like that. Because if you want to kind of use her logic about God using little infiltrators into areas, then you could probably make some sort of a weird basis for also saying is God's moving through. Oh God, it's even hard for me. Putin? I don't know. I mean, but when you get this far off the reservation, you can justify just about anything. And Kat, you may feel like I'm judging you because I am. And at the end, I know you're saying, who do you feel? Who are you that feels justified to do this? Well, I'm just going ahead and saying this. I think that you're screwing over the name of Jesus. I think you're screwing over Christianity and folks like you. So guess what? I think it's very healthy to point out your insanity. And it's not even insanity. If folks like this were just purely insane, that would be one thing. Like if this was just a mental disorder, right? Then yes, then I am a horrible person doing this. But these people have followers, and followers that continue to give them money to continue doing this. And they say they're doing this. They're doing this in the name of Jesus. They say they're forwarding Christianity. They say they're on God's side, but I just don't buy it. And I'm a guy that does like to buy flood buckets from Jim Baker. No, I don't. But this is just what gets me about it. Especially when you set up a narrative to where nobody can judge you, no one can say anything against it, and that you're always right. Does that sound like church? Oh my goodness, why am I still defending church? There's many days where I'm not defending church. I'm actually just defending the movement that Jesus started. That involves loving one's neighbor, that involves loving one's enemies, and hopefully trying to create the world into being a better place. Not molding it into our own image, but doing things through acts of grace and generosity and compassion and kindness. You know, those things, those kind of central Jesus-y things. And before I mention this, do yourself a favor sometime. Either, hey, you can go ahead and pause this show and go elsewhere, or remember this later. Go on YouTube and look up GOP Jesus. Yeah, there's a new video out. It's amazing. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So we've had our Christian crazy kind of from the past and kind of from the right now present. And now we're looking forward here in the Christian crazy. Actually, it's so crazy, it doesn't even fit into the Christian crazy. It's going to get the award of being the grand old WTF of the week. So here we go with that.
What in the hot hell is wrong with you?
What the hell is wrong with you people?
So. Brings us to our WTF for the week. And that's where we're at right now. And with that, over the past week, elections end, and then we get even more nuttiness. We find out that, tiny little golden baby Jeff Sessions is getting his walking papers. So I know on one level, we're kind of like, yay, he was a weird dude that also had a bunch of kind of weird fetishes that he was trying to push through legislation to make happen. So yeah, so there's that dude. So Trump fires him and then puts in another weird dude, Matthew Whitaker, who is Trump's newest stooge that's in charge of the Justice Department. He's kind of, if we want to use like some Christianese, like we were hearing earlier, he's kind of one of those folks that you would say is maybe like a warrior for the king. He's there to make sure the Justice Department doesn't take down God's appointed. What a good man. And I'm not going to waste your time because there's better articles, there's better folks that are out there talking about a lot of Whitaker's career. But one thing I did want to focus on, and one thing I want to make sure that is known is what kind of a dude he is. He's got some like questionable business practices. He's made questionable statements about the Mueller investigation. But the reason it pops on our radar here is because he also has some interesting ideas about how, well, let me go ahead and let him explain this. And this comes from, I stumbled on this over on Right Wing Watch. And I'm going to read part of their article, but then I'm going to let you listen to Whitaker explain this stuff in his own terms, in his own words. So their article, which is entitled, Acting AG Whitaker, Judges should have had a biblical view of justice. Yes. It's a little bit of a tease, but I'm going to go ahead with this. So their article starts by saying this. Matt Whitaker, the new acting attorney general appointed by President Donald Trump on November 7, believes that judges should be, quote, people of faith, and that non-believers should not serve in the federal judiciary. At least that's what he implied during in 2014 during an Iowa candidate forum moderated by right-wing pundit Eric Erickson. His parents hated him. On which Right Wing Watch reported. And at the time, Whitaker was vying for the Republican nomination to the United States Senate, a bid he ultimately lost to Joni Ernst, who today serves as a state junior senator. The article goes on to say the forum was hosted by the Family Leader, a religious right group that enjoys outsized influence during presidential primary season because of Iowa's presidential caucuses, which serve as the first the first contest in the presidential campaign season. So he's on this conservative, not debate. Debate's not quite the right word. But yes, this is really more of like a symposium or kind of a get to know your candidates forum. And, here's what Whitaker has to say. I'll just let him speak in his own words.
Mr. Whitaker?
Well, as someone that's interacted with the federal judiciary a time or two, I will tell you that I have a unique perspective on federal judges. And, while I agree, I want to understand their judicial philosophy and whether they understand natural law and natural rights, and then the founding documents and how they fit together. I don't think that gets us far enough because natural law oftentimes is used from the eye of the beholder, if you will. And what I'd like to see is things like their worldview, what informs them, how have they lived their lives, are they people of faith, do they have a biblical view of justice, which I think is very important because we all know that our government...
Levitical or New Testament? Huh?
I'm a New Testament. And what I know is as long as they have that worldview, that they'll be a good judge. And if they have a secular worldview where this is all we have here on earth, then I'm going to be very concerned about how they judge.
So this is the guy. This is our new Attorney General. It's a guy that's overseeing Justice Department. Guy that doesn't see justice as all equal. See, this is what gets me about this whole push towards nationalism and Trumpism and all these other just whatever the hell isms that are just disgusting and kind of rotting our country right now. See, he checks off the two boxes that Trump looks for. Is he like a religious nutty? Is he like a religious nutter butter totally out there in his beliefs that'll make Trump's constituency happy? Yes. So he's got that. He's got the whatever they call biblical worldview that still has nothing to do with Jesus. But they hold to that. And two, he will be an absolute stooge for Trump. So essentially, Trump is just making sure that he has his hands and control over everywhere. And that his base will be happy. Because this guy says crazy crap like this. And now, this guy, at least for the time being, is our acting or interim Attorney General, which is pretty scary. And as we've seen like over this past week, over Trump's entire life, Trump has a problem with the truth. Trump has a problem with sticking to the truth. Trump has a problem telling the truth. Trump has a problem with reality in general. We know that. But in this age where we are stuck in this place where it feels like there is no truth anymore, where we feel like, oh, up is down, black is white, the White House says this thing, the media tells us this thing, our eyeballs tell us this thing, like, what do we hang on to? One of the things that I continue to go back to, and this is going to take a less than political turn on this show, and I recently had some listeners. It was a couple from Ohio. That's all I'll tell you. They asked for anonymity, but they sent me this. We kind of had this really beautiful exchange over email, just kind of getting to know people's stories a little bit, where they were sharing their story with me and why things like Snarky Faith has kind of spoken to them, and it was kind of an honest and raw and brave thing that happened via email, which is odd because you'd expect these things to happen face to face. But one of the most beautiful things that I continue to go back to is just the nature of story and the power of story and the power of our stories, the power of our lives, the power of our truth that we are walking through. And as they were just kind of just explaining just their frustrations in places, where they'd been and tried and all this other kind of stuff, it got me back to thinking about my story. And in many ways, I'd wanted to be able to probably to them express more of my own story to them just via email, but I honestly at the time didn't feel like typing it all out. And as I kind of sat and thought about it, going like, gosh, I want to say more of my story, I was like, oh, wait. I'm much better at talking than I am at writing. So what I wanted to do, and we haven't done this in a while, here on the show. And as time goes on, and as we've changed formats over the life of the show, you tend to pick up listeners and drop listeners, and the way it goes, that's just how it is. And I wanted to really just kind of give some space to kind of talk about, like, not even really why Snarky Faith exists, but really just about me. And I know in a certain sense that can sound like, here's a whole show about me, look at me. No, I don't mean it that way. But the power of stories that I'm beginning to see happen during the midterms, people being able to really share their stories and their journeys, and this isn't going to be anything that's amazing or bombastic or inflammatory, but it's still my story. And if you're any kind of a regular listener to Snarky Faith, and you've ever been curious about what makes this guy tick, I'll give you somewhat of a nutshell in the time that we have here today, because my hope, like that awesome couple that I met that listens to this show in Ohio, and they shared their story, and their story is powerful, and their story is continuing forward, and it's evolving and changing, as is my story. So here you go. This is going to kind of be Snarky Unfiltered. We've had this for a couple weeks now, but we're kind of in a weird climate now in the country, and I kind of just I'm feeling like just to kind of start pulling stuff back and getting a little bit more raw and real. And we'll see how raw and real we get. But yeah, here we go. This is my story. So I was born to a typical, normal, suburbanite Atlanta family. And when I was around 3 years old, my sister was born, who was severely autistic, and that event really just changed everything. I mean, again, when you say like significant events happen when you're 3, you don't know what stuff was like before. But me growing up with having a special needs child in my home really changed the way I viewed the world. On one level, just kind of the, I guess, cultural sphere, it's a very isolating thing. When there's stuff in the world that people don't get, or it doesn't make sense, or it's, not what you'd call normal, folks tend to not like to be around that kind of stuff. So that, if you're ever wondering why I'm a weird guy, some of it came from me being raised in a different, with a different perspective and a different viewpoint to the world. And you take that, and that was probably enough to be able to give me a unique experience in my formative years in my life. But it made me grow up very fast. And I was a person that was relied upon heavily in our family to be able to take care of my sister and make sure my parents could continue to put food on the table. But you take that, and then you mix it in with faith and religion. From my very earliest age, I can remember always just being in church. I can't ever really remember a time where I wasn't in church. And with all of this kind of came two really weird kind of parallel like dichotomies that I lived with. My dad, very Southern Baptist, very conservative, raised in that, and that was his world, and that was his faith, and that's how he viewed things. And then when my sister comes onto the picture, my mom starts trying to look towards, I mean, like all parents do, you want to be able to either fix or change or really just grapple with a situation that is way out of your own control and out of your own depth. And so that led my mom to start trying to branch off to looking towards more Pentecostalism or type charismatic churches, because in her mind, if God can fix my sister, then that makes sense. In the Bible there was healing, so I'm being raised in these two kind of spheres where, like on Wednesdays or oftentimes like on Sunday mornings, I'm being raised in a more conservative Southern Baptist environment, but then at the same time, my mom's taking me off to these like prayer rallies and healing events and tent meetings and all of this, and I'm beginning to see both of these things. And they're both not making sense to me at all. And I think that some of that comes from having to grow up early. You begin to see adults as people, and you begin to start to see their tells, and you start to see their BS, and you start to see that even though my mom, in her eyes, filled with just this desire for hope and wanting to fix the situation that she was in, couldn't see those things. And I was in circles where people were praying in tongues, and me being a kid that was raised with a pretty raging case of asthma as well too, I would get thrown into the mix also with needing healing. And you begin to see stuff, and you begin to see that in all of this, that a lot of these constructs are very, very human in form. But at the same time, I always had this weird sense that like God was there. And the weird thing to me was I didn't see God as much in the church, because it just seemed either like following like this rote progression to what a service is, or to being what a Christian is. You just do these things, and we just do this, and it's just on like repeat every week. We just do this. Or then you kind of get to the charismatic circles of church, where it ends up just being like it really just about pageantry. And in the mix of all of this, there's this message: if only you believe enough, if you only believe enough, only you believe enough. And it's powerful. It's powerful to control people. But even as a kid, I just remember kind of sitting here going, huh, really? And I was always one to quietly and respectfully, because my parents wouldn't have it any other way, question things, which ultimately meant I just questioned things in my head. Because people don't like questions. A lot of times, youth pastors and other folks in churches don't like questions. Even respectful questions, they don't like them. They like to be the one answering questions. They don't want to have questions posed to them. And through all of that, it just began to give me just this really weird, bizarre perspective. So, in general, so me having special needs sister kind of ostracized me from certain people because they just thought it was odd and weird, and it made them feel uncomfortable. And then in the church world, I just didn't get it. Like, I was there, but I just didn't get it. But I remember going like, there's something more. There's something more out there. Like, there's something more that I want to like grab onto, because I don't think all this God stuff is wrong. It just felt weird, the way that they kept trying to like shove God into different preordained boxes. This is our God. We'll squish him in here. But I remember like one of my moments that stuck out to me, and it was one of those moments, especially like I began to think about it again after we had Brandon Andrus on the show a little while back, who wrote Beauty and the Wreckage, and reading through his book and talking with him on and off the air, it made me just kind of like begin to reconnect with those places in life that everything felt very real and very and very certain. And just thinking through how tragedy and stuff can happen to us. It brought me back to a place I don't like to always think about, but I remember I was there when my sister died. And I remember just the chaos of my parents calling 911, and the ambulance is like making wrong turns, and I'm out trying to like run and get them in the house. And I come in the house because it's just me and my mom in the house at this time, and it's just chaos, and everything's moving in slow motion. And what ends up happening is my mom and my sister go off in the ambulance to the hospital, and I was just told by some of my neighbors, it's like, just your dad's coming home from work and he'll get you. And I remember it was like the longest like 45 minutes in my life, just kind of sitting there alone in my house after like all of this chaos had just rained down and nothing made sense. And through all of this that I was kind of seeking on my own, trying to like find like, where is God in like this conservative area? Where's God in this Pentecostal area? Like, where is God in any of this? Like, none of this makes sense. I had like the strongest like sense of that everything was just okay. Like, I remember sitting there, and even though nothing was okay, but like I wasn't alone, and I was okay. And it's one of those moments in life that kind of begins to just define you. And just being in that moment, it really began to change me. And from that point, it kind of gave me what I'd always felt kind of all along, but hadn't been able to put words to, was the fact that like, oh, there's church, and then there's God, and the two don't necessarily have anything to do with one another. And that's kind of a big like thing to like wrestle through the brain of a 13-year-old. But it was one of those moments, and especially not just that moment, but the next one's preceding, where how the church responded and how, pastors would come and try to tell me it's all going to be okay, and all this other kind of just fluffy BS that is just a lie, and they use it because they want to get out of the situations, because nobody is comfortable with grief and nobody knows what to do in moments of grief. Which, in life, as I've moved forward, I've begun to realize is sometimes you just need someone to sit there and not speak. But it began this weird parallel for me in life where there was God and there was the church. And the two of them don't necessarily always have to go together. I'm not saying that they don't ever go together. I think they do. But I think by and large, they don't. So you're beginning to see like the foundings of my snarky warpness. Fast forward, a few years, and I meet an amazing woman that somehow thinks my brand of crazy is cool, and says it like, yeah, let's kind of do this life thing together. So I get married, and I can't shake this God thing, and I keep feeling like there's more to life. I've got like I'm doing a job I wanted to do, that I was educated to do, and I kept going. There's more than this, and I again, being a person that likes to step back and kind of watch the way the world moves. I'm watching it, and I'm just saying everyone's running around, and I don't like this. And if you're real, kind of a thing, let's see where this can lead. And that led me down a really interesting path that I honestly really don't have many regrets from. But it led me to quitting my job, working for a church plant for free for 2 years, and then eventually led us away from hometown, Marietta, Georgia, all the way out to the West Coast, where I did what I thought was going to be. I thought I found the place to be able to work. This is a place, and it was just simply kind of a baby mega church in the making. And certainly they would do things better because they were larger than the other smaller churches I've been in. And so I get hired there as a youth pastor, and things go as amazing as you would expect them to go. And just giving a little bit, just because I'm not here to air dirty laundry, but just giving you guys a perspective of how Snarky Faith eventually kind of came about, which is really just me. I remember getting into an argument after I preached a sermon to our youth group with the pastor's wife, and she was disagreeing with the sermon that I was preaching. And so I said, which part do you disagree with? And so she goes to explain, well, that story you were telling, the parable about the lost sheep, and there's 99 sheep, and Jesus leaves the sheep to go and rescue the other sheep, and she's going through this, and she's like, I just disagree with this. And I was like, okay, what did I say that you disagreed with? She's like, well, I disagree with the idea behind this. And I remember me saying this, and when I was younger, I was also less diplomatic, I think, as we all are. But at that moment, I was actually really trying hard to be diplomatic. And she's like, I just don't agree with it. And I said, so you don't agree with what Jesus said? Because that was her arguing point. And then she goes, uh-huh. And I just kind of paused there. And I was like, oh, all of this is just crazy, isn't it? I didn't say this out loud. I'm just doing this in my own head. And, I went from there and said, okay, the church is broken. Don't want to be a part of this. Flash forward, then I work for a nonprofit. I hired for a nonprofit because I like this idea of being able to go out and to reach, especially young people, because I had a heart for just being able to help kids that didn't have anybody in their lives. Like I grew up very alone, and I knew how that felt, and I wanted people to know that they weren't alone in this world. So I was working with an organization that at least allowed me. The organization was more evangelistic in nature, but my heart was really trying to do more community outreach. And we were able to at least set up something that did a lot of community outreach, reaching kids that were kind of like street kids that would be missed. And I did that for a number of years. And then for some reason, I decided to go through seminary, which was the best of times and the worst of times. Actually, it was amazing. I loved going through seminary because it helped me to continue to put words to a lot of the aches and the pains and dissatisfaction I had with the way that I saw the church was going in America. I saw that. I saw it, and I would challenge folks and professors on it and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes they'd agree, sometimes they'd disagree with the way I saw the world. But I think going through that process of pushing back and challenging things was incredibly formative for me. And going through this process as it grows you, and it also just adds to you more travelers along your journey. And many of those travelers that I walked with, I can still continue to walk with, and they end up being just wonderful humans that help me stay sane. And as I went through that, which the funniest thing is that in many ways, seminary told me that I am absolutely not fit to work in a church because of the way that I think. And it isn't because I don't love God. It isn't because I don't believe in Jesus. It's because I don't kiss ass well, and I don't follow well. And that was something that I began to really see. And through all of that, and that leads to many other stories of just what eventually led us here to this Chapel Hill, Carborough area. And within me, through all of this, was this huge desire to be able to kind of begin to talk about religion in a way that was logical and that made sense. It led me to, I run different groups here in the area where we meet and kind of have conversations about anything from politics to religion to ethics to all of that roped in together, and doing it in a way that makes sense. Doing it in a way that is respectful of other people's opinions, but in a way that it can help us to grow. And the more that I've done that, and more that I've done this here on the air, that this has allowed me to get to know other people that have different viewpoints of mine, and it's stretched me, and it's grown me, and it's helped me to begin to realize more and more that I am 41 years old and I am still fully in process. And my posture is that I will always be fully in process as I continue to live here on this earth, because I think that one of the things that religion has done to us is tried to make it like a very linear path towards change. Like, you need to get saved, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and then God is finally happy with you. And to me, as a kid, like, I remember sitting back in those pews as a kid, like, listening in church, going, this is what you do. This is what God wants. And I remember just hearing it over and over again, the way that these people were packaging it and phrasing it. And I just continue to tell myself that, like, if that's it, like, that's God's really tiny and small. And if I'm honest, based upon the way that a lot of pastors I've heard have like to assume God is moving, God ends up also being very petty. And for me, that didn't make any sense. For a God that sat with me in my despair when nothing made sense meant a ton to me. And that didn't seem like the God I was hearing about. Furthermore, I remember sitting in the pews also being able to hear about, oh, heaven's going to be like this. We're going to be singing for eternity. And if you've ever sat in any pew in most churches in America, the music you're hearing is not very good. And the songs, I know they're classics, are not very stimulating for the young mind. But I had that question in my head of going like, oh my gosh, if the whole goal is getting saved and then going to heaven when you're dead, and heaven's going to kind of be like one big church service over and over and over again, oh my God, please kill me now. This is terrible. But for me, and where I've walked with people of faith and people that have no faith, that both parties continue to speak with me and continue to journey with me and continue to do life with me and continue to challenge me. And it has taken me a long time to get to a point to be able to say, I'm really okay with being very unfinished. Because if anything, being in and around Christian culture most of my life, you're told that you need to be fixed. Like, we don't like the broken. Like, we'll preach about the broken, but we really don't like the broken. The messy, we don't like the messy. Keep it clean here. Let's keep it nice and tidy. And And I know many people may have been hoping for a lot more like snarky, vengeful stories in my journey. And those come out when you buy me a couple beers. So if you want to contact me and have some drinks and talks, then those can come out in like a bar setting, but not here on the air. Because I feel like we've moved to this place in our country where it's all about what team you're on. It's all about what tribe you ascribe to. And if you're not on that team, if you're not on that tribe, if you're not in that clan, then you're bad, and you're almost not even like human anymore. And what grieves me the most of this process is the fact that I feel like the church in many ways ends up being the most hateful tribe. And I say that because they're supposed to know better. Like, in their minds, if you know Jesus, if you've read what Jesus calls us to do, which is fairly clear, but instead you spend most of your life hating people that disagree with you, to me that never made sense. Like that never made sense. Like this idea of who Jesus is, has nothing to do with whatever constructs I put around Jesus. It really just has to do with the words that we're left here with. And being told to go and love others and to step outside of boundaries and to go to those that other people don't go to me, that was always very transformative. But my experiences on Sunday morning, or my experiences inside the mechanisms of church, never left me with those kind of Jesus-y, audacious feelings that we were just called to go and just be really good, loving, compassionate people with dirt under our nails that are just really trying to live to help others. Because instead, I just continue to see the church in America being just as consumeristic, just as materialistic, just as messed up as the rest of the world. Whereas they're supposed to be, at least that's what they would preach to you, that they're ascribing to a higher ethic. But those ethics get thrown out the window. And so that leaves me in a very interesting and precarious situation, which is eventually kind of what led me to starting this show. And I joke that this show ends up being my catharsis many weeks, but it really is. This is cheaper than therapy, and my wife is okay with me doing this. No, I'm joking. But I wanted to, like, I began like this whole segment talking about this couple that wrote to me and the dialogue that we had, but I started the show for folks like that, for folks that were saying, none of this makes sense, but there's still something I'm interested in when in regards to this Jesus character. And I can't tell you like how many people I continue to have conversations with that have that similar story, to the couple I know, to my own story, where I feel like most of my history being a part of the institutional church has really just been that of spiritual discontent, of being able to see, but we could be this, but the answer being, but this is church. Yes, but we're supposed to do this, but the answer is, but this is church. And it's this idea of wanting to go out and to do and to make stuff better versus, but the bills need to be paid here in the building. We need to have a control structure. We need to make sure that people feel they're having the church experience, or whatever BS that contends to mean. But it ends up just being like a glorified form of really just entertainment, or just kind of like a sick little club of ornery people that like to say that they have God on their side, so that gives them justification for doing a whole host of stuff. And even like as we begin our show making fun of the Christian crazy, I do that to speak sanity into the insanity that is Christianity. Because one of my worries in my heart would be that the people experience the church, but they never actually experience Jesus. And they experience the church and they say, this is bad, I don't like it, it's not for me. And they assume that those two are the same. And I think I said that earlier, and it was, and I'll just remember back to this, is that one of those defining, I think, aha moments for my life was that there's the church and then there's Jesus, and the two don't always meet, and the two don't always agree. And actually, they very rarely agree. And so this show was really just started for those that stuff doesn't make sense, but they want it to make a little more sense. But even as I had said earlier, that I am still in process, and I'm still trying to make sense of stuff, and I'm still journeying forward, and I'm still trying to find my way in the midst of this. And I appreciate that I have the honor with being able to share these kind of stories, my stories, and other people's stories with you that come here and listen to this show, and others that are like it. Because there is more than what we see. That the church that we see, the religious right that we see, all of that, that's not Christianity. That's something else. And I know I've said this before probably many times, that I wish we could come up with new words. But I'm not saying that from a marketing standpoint, just because oftentimes when people say church, they mean very different things. When people in the church say love, that means very different things. And so I wish there was a way to be able to separate the way that we use language, but it isn't. But that, in somewhat of a nutshell, is what brought about this show. And I appreciate folks that send us emails at questions@snarkyfaith.com. I tell you, I will answer them, and hopefully we'll have a jazzy conversation. But we're in process. And as we've seen from this last election, it still feels like our country is in process. And I would rather be groups of people that believe differently, but that at least can believe that we're all in process and that we're hopefully getting better and that we're better together than we are apart. And even though when we look out into the world, especially the political hellscape that we live in right now, or even looking out over like the American Christian church world at that hellscape that it is, that there is more. And being so focused in the narratives that are being pushed out from those areas, they're only good in the fact that they are just basic raw data and information for you to say, oh, okay, that's where these people stand. Oh, okay, that's where they stand. But what I'm calling us to do is to be more raw, to be more real, to be more vulnerable, and to really hone in on the power of our own stories and begin to share stories. And I'm not even calling this for people that are people of faith. I just think that we need to become people in our country that we share more stories, we share more dialogue, we share of ourselves, because the way I vote is not my story. Where I choose to worship or not worship on a Sunday is not my story. Our stories are much more complex. And my hope would be that we're able to learn to be able to honor and respect and learn from other people's stories, whether they're like ours or not like ours. So yeah, that was me this week. And you probably heard enough of me talking about me for this hour. But as we end this broadcast, just a reminder that you can catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. You can also find this and other shows in all places where podcasts are posted: iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all those other kind of jazzy places that I always I forget to mention to people. Oh, and Spotify. Yeah, we're on all those places. So just look up Snarky Faith. If you're looking to have further dialogue and conversations, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. You can look up Snarky Faith. You can look up Stuart D. Loney on there as well, too. I'd love to have more conversations. I'd love to hear your stories. And I look forward to how all of our collective stories hopefully evolve into moving this world into a better place. So I will send you off this hour with the holiest amount of grace and peace and snark. I'm out of here. Have a great week.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, A spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.